Welcome. My name is Valena Beety. I'm the Deputy Director of the Academy for Justice and a law professor at Arizona State University Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law. We respectfully acknowledge that ASU sits on the ancestral homelands of Indigenous nations that have inhabited this land for centuries. That includes the Pima and Maricopa peoples. Today, murder is the third leading cause of death for American Indian and Alaska Native women. In 2019, the Arizona legislature passed House Bill 2570, which created a study committee on the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in our state. Today, in honor of the National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, we are exploring the work of this study to document, reduce, and ultimately end violence against Indigenous women and girls in Arizona. We're joined today by 4 women who are working on this study. We welcome District 18 Representative Jennifer Jermaine, the sponsor of House Bill 2570 and the chair of the study committee. Professor Kate Fox, the director of ASU's Research on Violent Victimization Lab. Sarah Julian, a social worker and law and policy fellow at the Academy for Justice. And Hilary Edwards, a current law student at ASU and a research assistant at the Academy for Justice. Thank you for joining us today. Representative Jermaine, why did the legislature pass Arizona House Bill 2570 to create this study committee?
Thank you so much, Nina. The Arizona State Legislature began exploring this issue in 2016 with then Representative Winona Benally, and she led a group of community members, tribal leaders, and nonprofits within Indian country to begin forming around this topic. My family is White Earth Ojibwe, and I had originally joined the community group to bring a voice to our urban natives, the 574 tribes who live within our urban populations in Phoenix and Tucson. In 2018, when Representative Benally decided to step away from the state legislature, she asked me as a newly elected representative if I would carry this work forward, and I'm honored to continue what she and many other community leaders started. The purpose of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Study Committee is to gather and analyze the data so that we can begin to address this horrific ongoing violence committed against Native women and girls here in Arizona. This is a nationwide epidemic, and in 2016, there were more than 5,700 cases reported through the Department of Justice. Arizona was the 3rd state in the nation to pass this kind of legislation, and our committee was the first to include members from both legislative chambers, elected tribal leaders from our local land-based tribes, state, county, and tribal law enforcement agencies, the Arizona Attorney General's Office, the County Attorney General's Office, and a sitting tribal judge, and members from our urban Indian centers with Phoenix and Tucson, and social workers who specialize within Indian country. Biggest problem that we're facing is that the data simply doesn't exist in law enforcement databases. As a state, Arizona does a good job tracking missing children, but there is no standard for tracking missing adults. And there is no standard for working across jurisdictional lines. We simply don't have a holistic view of what the problem is, and there are unfathomable gaps within the data. This is why we reached out to Arizona State University to partner with us on this project. Dr. Fox, Dr. Morris, Ms. Julian, Ms. Edwards, and your team, and the rest of ASU bring specialized experience within the areas of criminology, law enforcement, victim services, and data analysis. The team is culturally competent, and we have confidence in their ability to approach this very delicate subject in a respectful, honorable way to our Indigenous communities. Our goal with the whole committee is to try to find the data so that we can create the crime maps and then target resources to those areas that need it so that we are stopping this violence from continuing into the future.
Thank you. Professor Fox, what is the Research on Violent Victimization Lab and what is its role in this project?
Yes, so the goal of the ASU Research on Violent Victimization Lab is to conduct research to promote safer and healthier communities. Our research lab is part of the Watts College for Public Service and Community Solutions, and it's in the School of Criminology and Criminal Justice, where I am a professor. We specialize in research on reducing victimization among underserved populations, and our work mostly focuses on American Indian and migrant communities. In our role on the project is to partner with Representative Jermaine and Arizona's study committee to conduct a statewide study to investigate and reduce the murder and missing of Indigenous women and girls in our state. We are honored to work with Representative Jermaine and the study committee on this statewide effort. And I'm also delighted that we have two of our research lab team members here with us today. And I'm very appreciative of our partnership with the Academy for Justice. We are all working together to shed light on the murder and missing of Indigenous women and girls so we can ultimately reduce this violent crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Julian, this project seeks criminal justice reforms, but why is this study important from a social services perspective?
Yeah, so law and policy reforms trickle down to social services in a couple of ways. They dictate who can receive services, how they receive services, and the type of assistance available to them, especially if the organization receives government funds. Social services are often the answer to community needs that laws and policies cannot address. Put another way, social services fill in the gap between the community and our governing institutions. I'm very excited to be a part of Dr. Fox's lab, and our team will be looking at the resources available to the Indigenous community when people experience the loss of a loved one, and we'll be asking about how that interaction was helpful to them. This way, Arizona policymakers and representatives can learn how to better serve the community from the perspective of the Indigenous community. Our team cannot stress enough how important it is that resources are culturally appropriate. When resources are culturally appropriate and respect Indigenous ways, they are ultimately more effective at serving the community and promoting health and safety.
Thank you, Ms. Julian. Ms. Edwards, why is this study important to Native American communities?
Yes, thank you. My name is Hilary Edwards, and I am a Swinomish Indian tribal member of the LaConner, or located in LaConner, Washington. The murder and missing of Indigenous women and girls is now gaining the attention it deserves in Arizona, as well as other states and the federal government. Native American communities in the U.S. often face crime rates that are higher than most regions in the country. In some communities, Native American women are murdered at an alarming rate that is 10 times as much as the national average. This project will help explain some of the circumstances surrounding this crisis. National and state missing person and homicide statistics are complicated when it comes to documenting Native American people because there are so many challenges with collecting this data. For example, some law enforcement agencies still do not have a category on their police reports to specify broadly one's Native American or Alaska Native racial designation or specifically their tribal affiliation. This project is paving the way to seek the justice that Native American women and girls deserve. So with this project, there are resources to focus on the issue. In Indian country, our tribal leaders make decisions for the next 7 generations. So I'm hopeful that with this work that we are doing with this project, it'll become a sustainable model for other states to follow, because the next 7 generations, like my nieces and my cousins, should not have to fall victim to these statistics. This project is an important start to changing these statistics. Thank you.
Thank you. On a national level, Representative Deb Haaland of New Mexico has introduced the Not Invisible Act in Congress to address the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls across the United States. Do you have any final thoughts on this crisis in Arizona and in the United States?
Thank you so much. And we are very, very grateful to Representative Holland and the committee in Congress. We are working diligently to make sure that what we are doing with our Arizona committee can dovetail into what will eventually become a national study so that people don't need to double up on the work. We're doing it very deliberately, very cautiously, and making sure that we're checking all the boxes that we need locally and also they need federally.
Yes, and also just a few months ago, the federal government enacted 2 pieces of legislation about MMIWG, which is the murder and missing of Indigenous women and girls. And we now have 14 states with MMIWG legislation similar to ours. So the nation is starting to wake up and acknowledge this crisis, and I'm optimistic that other states will follow suit. And in fact, every state needs this type of legislation because every state is home to Indigenous people. Thank you again to the Academy for Justice for recognizing the significance of May 5th as the National Day of Awareness for murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. Thank you.
And thank you for the work of your lab and to legislator Jermaine, who made this possible and introduced this bill and championed it such that we're able to try and address this issue here in our own state. So thank you everyone today.